Cheers, everyone. Dave Brown here with the New Populist. Thank you again for joining me. Well, recently we had a meeting between Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un of North Korea, and that has gotten the attention of us here in the West because we are increasingly concerned about these two countries working together. And it's not just Russia and North Korea, it is Russia and China, Russia and Iran. And collectively, we view these countries as a threat to U.S. global power and hegemony. So that gives us here in the West, in the United States in particular, two choices, two paths in front of us to follow. The first path, the first choice is one where we recognize that we now live in a multipolar world and we can no longer go around the world enforcing our rules-based international order. And this is where we have to accept that China is a global power that we can't just keep beating up on and that we have to treat them as equals and find a way to coexist together peacefully. Now, that is the path I prefer. I think that is the reality of the situation here. We do live in a multipolar world, and there's nothing we can do about it except cooperate for mutual benefit. Unfortunately, there's a second path, and this is the one that our elites in Washington seem to be following. This is one where we do everything we can to maintain our power and where we have a stated goal of trying to limit or contain Russia and China militarily and economically, even if it means that there's some potential clash in the future. Now, there's one big problem with this strategy here of containment of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran. And that is, we don't really have the power to do it. We want to do it, but we don't actually have the tools in front of us to do it. Those countries together, collectively, they are too big now. And so the solutions that I have seen proposed by people who are supposedly so much smarter than us don't seem to be very good solutions at all. So just to really give you an example of this, I want to cover a recent article from the RAND Corporation, one of my favorite think tanks here in the Washington, D.C. area, that really gives us an insight into what our leaders are thinking. And in this article, the author, Bruce Bennett, will try to give solutions for the problem of Russia, China, and North Korea. And as I go through them, you will see that we don't got nothing. There's not a whole lot we can do. And I hope more of our leaders realize this, but unfortunately, they are very stubborn. So the article is called North Korea, Russia, and China, the Developing Trilateral Imperialist Partnership. There are no easy ways for the United States and its allies to counter the developing Russia, China, North Korea partnership, but there are options to consider and steps to take. There are also fissures in the relationship to exploit. So we are viewing them as their imperialist. They're working together for their imperialist goals, never mind the last 60 years of U.S. expansion, of NATO going toward Russia, U.S. wars in the Middle East. We have bases everywhere. Ignore that. They are the imperialists, not the United States. Let's begin. We are increasingly greeted by stories of a developing partnership between Russia, China, and North Korea. Much of the world has isolated Russia for its invasion of Ukraine, Moscow's constant targeting of civilians and its clear violations of international humanitarian law have only exacerbated this isolation. Running out of munitions and other military supplies, Russia has sought help from countries with comparable records of human rights violations, North Korea and China. Senior delegations from Russia and China recently met with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un at a parade to celebrate the 70th anniversary of the 1953 Korean War ceasefire. Kim is expected to soon visit Russian President Vladimir Putin in Vladivostok. We also hear of North Korea shipping artillery shells and other military supplies to Russia, of China providing dual-use technology and components to Russia, and of Russia proposing combined exercises with North Korea and China. Now let's go back to the part here about North Korea sending Russia artillery shells. We have this article from a couple of days ago. It's titled, North Korean Arms for Russia Probably Won't Make a Big Difference in the Ukraine War, Milley says. U.S. Army General Mark Milley, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, said the recent meeting in Russia between North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin will probably lead North Korea to provide Soviet-era 152 millimeter artillery rounds to Moscow, but he said it was not yet clear how many or how soon. And I'm saying to myself, wait a second, this hasn't happened yet, but we have articles from last year already saying it has happened. October 2022, New York Times. Russia is buying North Korean artillery, according to U.S. intelligence. Reuters. White House says North Korea supplying Russia with artillery shells. So we have reports from last year that this was already happening, but now we have Mark Milley from just a few days ago saying that Russia and North Korea were negotiating a deal in which North Korea would send artillery shells to Russia. So which one is it? Were they already getting them, or will they get them in the future? And that is my issue with U.S. intelligence, our media. They will just throw things out there when convenient, propaganda, and then they'll just move on from it if it turns out to not be true. And apparently, the American public just doesn't pay attention or doesn't care. And it's very frustrating. So I don't know if they were lying back then or if they're lying right now. Maybe Russia will never get these artillery shells from North Korea. Maybe this is all just U.S. intelligence projecting and trying to somehow throw North Korea into this conflict so they can turn the heat up on that country. The article continues, the developing imperialist partnership. Very scary, the imperialist partnership. The alliances and partnerships in which the United States participates focus on defensive objectives. This is not the case for this emerging trilateral partnership. Russia's Putin seeks to conquer Ukraine and make it part of a restored Russian empire. China's President Xi Jinping seeks regional, if not global dominance by 2049. North Korea's Kim seeks Korean unification under North Korean control. In short, these three countries have imperialistic goals. China and North Korea have not yet launched major wars to achieve their aims, but they both have active information campaigns, and China has taken aggressive economic measures to extend its influence worldwide. The Belt and Road Initiative showcases Beijing's efforts to secure economic leverage. The level of trade China has established with South Korea, Australia, and many other countries is another example of that drive. Now, I laugh when they say that the United States participates or focuses on defensive objectives. Who believes that? defensive objectives. NATO has only moved further and further east toward Russia, despite us saying that we would not move NATO an inch more. We have bases all across the world, the Philippines, Saudi Arabia, Germany. We have bases everywhere. We have started wars in Afghanistan. We occupied Afghanistan for 20 years. We started the war in Iraq. We destabilized Libya, destroyed that country. Yet somehow the Rand Corporation, Bruce Bennett here, is saying that the United States is only part of an alliance that focuses on defense, and it's just laughable. But you wonder, do they actually believe that, or are they just BSing? Now, I think some actually do, which is scary. They're so delusional. They are true believers. But there are definitely a few out there who know that we're full of crap and we are trying to maintain our empire. Another thing here, he talks about China trying to increase trade with other countries. And he says it in a way that almost implies it's a negative thing to trade with other countries, that somehow this is pernicious or evil. And I don't quite understand that. Of course, China is going to trade with other countries and to improve its own lot, and also to, again, is it economic leverage or is it just economics? Again, that comes down to perspective. The article continues. The risks of this trilateral imperialist partnership. There are at least 4 major risks this developing trilateral imperialist partnership poses. The first is that substantial North Korea and Chinese assistance to Russia could prolong the war in Ukraine and substantially increase the damage inflicted and the war costs. Russia's deliberate attacks on civilian and civilian infrastructure are war crimes with humanitarian costs that are unacceptable and need to stop. Moreover, the longer Western countries need to support Ukraine's independence, the further they will deplete their own military equipment and supplies, sending them to Ukraine. Second, China and North Korea might do more than send equipment and supplies to Ukraine. They might also send some military personnel and even technical experts. Doing so will convert Ukraine into a Russia, China, North Korea laboratory for examining and improving various weapons and tactics in actual warfare. This is not unlike what happened with the Spanish Civil War before World War II. The result will likely be improved military capabilities for all 3 countries, making them more lethal in future conflicts. Now, he mentions that we are depleting our stocks. And that is, of course, what is happening. Biden said straight up why we were sending cluster munitions to Ukraine. He said, we're out. We have nothing left to send, so we have to send these cluster munitions. And our production of artillery shells, what we're trying to ramp up to, is just insufficient. It cannot keep up with what Russia currently is producing. So if we're going to, at some point in the future, engage in a large war with Russia and China, we have a lot more to do, and there's nothing to suggest that we will increase our industrial capacity in order to do this. So again, like I said in the beginning of this video, we want to contain Russia and China and maintain our empire, but I'm not sure if we have that capability. The third thing here, because all 3 members of this trilateral imperialist partnership seek to control territory beyond their current borders, they may at some point decide to start wars simultaneously. By attacking at the same time, they would put maximum pressure on the military forces of their opponents, much as the Axis powers did early in World War II. Concerned about the possibility of multiple wars for decades, the United States sized its military forces to be able to respond to two major theater wars simultaneously. By the George W. Bush administration, this requirement had been adjusted to winning in one theater and holding in another. But the United States has not sustained such capabilities for many years. The prospect of fighting three major theater wars simultaneously appears to be well beyond current U.S. military capabilities, especially with its depleted stock of military equipment and supplies. So, if Russia and China, North Korea all go on the attack at the same time, we're screwed. We can't do anything. We simply don't have the military in place, the supplies in place to fight that war. We can't do it. Finally, because all three of these partners possess nuclear weapons, any major war they launch has a significant possibility of involving nuclear weapons use. While conventional nuclear integration was very much part of U.S. military planning in the 1980s, it has not been pursued very seriously since the end of the Cold War. If the United States is not prepared for this kind of warfare, the prospects are high that a nuclear exchange could lead to a global nuclear catastrophe. Now, he says a nuclear exchange could lead to a global nuclear catastrophe. Let's change that word could to will. If there is a nuclear exchange, it will lead to a global nuclear catastrophe. So, how can the United States and its allies respond? There is no easy way to counter the developing Russia, China, North Korea partnerships. After all, military strikes against North Korea and Chinese military supplies en route to Russia could escalate this already very serious war. Let's stop there. If North Korea and China are shipping something there and we blow it up, that's an act of war. So it might, it's not could escalate. It will escalate, and now we have, World War III, right? Nevertheless, there are options to consider and steps to take. The first step is for the United States and its allies to work to better understand the future of warfare, including the vast uncertainties therein. These countries will not properly prepare for or deter a future war unless they can first characterize it. The challenge is clear. How many experts accurately predicted the war in Ukraine with the Russian advance stopped and Ukraine launching a significant counter-offensive? How many anticipated the weapons used, including newer weapons like suicide drones? How many spotted key vulnerabilities? Who clearly saw the role of the Russian nuclear shadow in limiting outside assistance, especially early on? Did many think the conflict would last this long? All these factors are essential to defining the military requirements, and they need to be understood. While studies are ongoing and lessons are being learned, a larger level of effort is justified, especially as concerns conventional nuclear integration. Now, this is one thing he says that is accurate. Warfare is changing. We've seen on the battlefield these drone attacks, automation, and that is something we definitely have to study. And we hope, and I'm sure it's happening, NATO's studying it, our war colleges are studying it, our Pentagon's studying it, but so are the Russians, the Chinese, and the North Koreans, and the Russians in particular because they're actually fighting this war. Their soldiers are actually in combat doing all these things. They're going to learn the best. So we're going to be behind them on this learning curve, and that gives their militaries, the Russian military, a huge advantage in a future conflict were that conflict to occur. Second, the United States needs to continue developing new military capabilities that will allow it to deal with Russia, China, and North Korea at a price the U.S. can afford. The newly announced Replicator Initiative is one example of a capability that exploits U.S. military cultural strengths, such as high technology, as well as the use of strong initiative by U.S. military personnel. Note that such capabilities are not just new technology, they also include the strategy, tactics, and operational art needed to deal with the potential threats. The Replicator Initiative. What is that? Well, got it right here from the Defense Department website. Hicks underscores U.S. innovation in unveiling strategy to counter China's military buildup. Ingenuity and innovation remain at the heart of the U.S. military's strategic advantage as it confronts the pressing challenges in the Indo-Pacific. Deputy Secretary of Defense Kathleen Hicks said today as she unveiled the Defense Department's initiative aimed at directly countering the People's Republic of China's rapidly buildup of its armed forces. Hicks said, as China focuses on the sheer mass of its military, the U.S. will outmatch adversaries by outthinking, outstrategizing, and outmaneuvering them. Under the strategy coined by Hicks as the Replicator Initiative, the Defense Department will field thousands of autonomous systems across multiple domains within the next 18 to 24 months. Hicks revealed the strategy during her remarks at the National Defense Industrial Association's Emerging Technologies for Defense conference in Washington. Replicator is meant to help us overcome the PRC's biggest advantage, which is mass, she said. More ships, more missiles, more people. She said through the initiative, the U.S. will augment its manufacturing and mobilization capabilities with our real comparative advantage, which is the innovation and spirit of our people. Even when mobilizing the U.S. economy and manufacturing base, rarely has the U.S. relied solely on its ability to match adversaries' scale alone, Hicks said. Now, what concerns me here is she's saying that our real comparative advantage is innovation and the spirit of our people. Maybe I'm old-fashioned, but I would prefer more people, more ships, and more missiles. It would seem that is why Russia is winning. They have more of those things on the battlefield than Ukraine does. So if we're going to focus in the future on our innovation and our spirit, I don't like our chances. And she mentions here, all these autonomous systems. How well will they work? We talked about the drone technology earlier and how drone technology is influencing the battlefield. But thousands of autonomous systems, is that really a replacement for people actually holding post and doing things? I don't know. I am very, very skeptical. Third, the United States should consider developing new military force requirements that respond to the developing threats. Washington must determine the U.S. forces required to deal with any warfare started by the Russia, China, North Korea partnership. The United States has, of course, been reluctant to establish such requirements, recognizing how expensive they would be. But as Ukraine learned, while an adequate defense budget is hard to afford before a war, the cost of an inadequate defense budget can be far higher if it does not deter an adversary from starting one. And the price being paid by Ukraine is nothing compared to what the world might have to pay off if a future war involves the use of nuclear weapons. The United States cannot afford to allow an appearance of inadequate military capabilities to drag it into such a war. Now, he's essentially saying we need to spend more money on our military. We already spend $800 billion a year. How much more can we possibly afford? We have just crossed over into having $33 trillion of debt. So we need to increase military spending to ward off the Chinese and the Russians. Now I go back to my comment earlier about what if we could actually just get along and not fight these wars. That would be so much better. But they can't think that way. So they want to spend more money on the military, inflate our budget, to $1 trillion in order to fend off Russia and China? Is that really going to work? Or is the real issue, again, the fact that we want to maintain empire and we're trying to find ways to crush these two countries that really don't need to be crushed? These are countries that we need to work with. Fourth, the United States and its allies could develop economic and information operations to counter North Korean and Chinese supplies sent to Ukraine. Any North Korean companies involved and the financial institutions supporting them should be subject to economic sanctions. Substantial international pressure should be placed on China and North Korea to disrupt the transfer of artillery shells and other items. There is some evidence that exposing and warning North Korea about shipping artillery shells to Russia has minimized what Pyongyang has sent thus far. Pyongyang might respond to international pressure if it is shown that North Korean artillery shells have been used to purposely kill civilians in Ukraine, thus making North Korea an accessory to Russia's war crimes. You can already see them setting this up. So Russia is going to take North Korean artillery and purposely just kill civilians. So we can come in and say, wow, North Korea is an accessory to Russia's war crimes. How convenient. But the bigger thing here is him talking about sanctions. When we placed sanctions on Russia over a year ago, we were predicting the collapse of the Russian economy. Well, guess what? In 2023, the Russian economy is expected to actually grow. Sanctions don't work. And threatening more sanctions on countries we already have sanctioned up to kazoo is not going to do a dang thing. And this is even, more the case looking at BRICS, the development of alternatives to the Western model, to the Western system. As these continue to develop, this will just make, again, sanctions even more and more useless. And we can keep throwing them on them, and it just won't matter. The fifth thing, let me just get through here, and this is really entertaining, really funny stuff here. The United States and South Korea might be able to exploit the presence of any North Korean personnel in Ukraine to send messages back to the North Korean elite. Such personnel would almost certainly come from elite families, as North Korea would only want to send reliable personnel unlikely to defect. Those same personnel have a tendency to consume whatever K-pop and K-dramas they're able to acquire, suggesting the utility of dispersing USB drives in areas where North Korean personnel operate. While some North Korean security personnel may try to collect and destroy this material, others might enjoy it. If Kim continues to send artillery to Russia, the United States could also threaten to deliver such USB drives to Pyongyang. Kim considers such material a vicious cancer that could cause his regime to collapse, so this unorthodox approach may give him pause. This is the K-pop offensive. We're going to get 1 million USB drives loaded with K-pop, and then we're going to fling them into the combat zone if there's North Koreans in the area, and perhaps fling them at Pyongyang in order to disrupt the country's culture and cause it perhaps to collapse. These are the solutions being proposed by Rand Corporation. And again, back to my whole, the whole point of this video, we don't have a lot what we can do to go after these countries, and we're pretty desperate for solutions. So desperate that we're actually advocating tossing USB drives of K-pop. 1 million USB drives. This is where we're at. This is funny stuff. And the genesis of this comes from a New York Times article back in 2021. I think it was written by a South Korean, and he talked about how the North Koreans wanted to keep some of the cultural stuff from South Korea out of North Korea. And there is a sliver of truth to the fact that when people sort of see how the rest of the world is living, that can cause an issue. But I think when Kim Jong-un was mentioning that this is such a bad thing, it's going to cause, a collapse, is exaggerating. We have people in our own country who think that our own, pop stuff is causing a collapse of our culture. And maybe it is on some level. But if we take it seriously, that we can, cause some sort of collapse of their culture through USB drives, we've taken it too far, and that is not a serious thing. And the last thing here. Finally, while in many ways Russia, China, and North Korea would appear to make for natural allies, there are fissures in their relationships to exploit. For example, China recently released a map that includes some Russian territory as part of China. Western powers should focus global attention on this issue and regularly ask China to explain it. Alternatively, Russia may find that North Korea wants more in exchange for its artillery shells than Russia is willing to provide. After hard negotiations, if North Korean artillery approves poor quality, or if any of the technology provided to North Korea by Russia fails to operate, this will present opportunities for information operations. Ultimately, China's designs for regional and global domination will include domination of Russia. If China provides Russia with equipment and supplies, it can be expected to demand recognition and payment for that contribution. Indeed, many Chinese military personnel will likely perceive that they are the senior partners in this relationship, and they would demand to be treated as such. U.S. and allied efforts to properly characterize Chinese objectives and Chinese demands could undermine the China-Russia relationship. The bottom line is that this partnership might be more fragile than first appearances suggest. Now, that is wishful thinking. Perhaps 5-10 years ago, we could really focus on the strategy of keeping these countries apart. But what is abundantly clear to the leadership of all three of these countries is that they are under attack by the West, and if one of them falls, the other two are next. They are fighting in their minds for their survival. They will not let trifles, come in the way and disrupt their relationship. There are much bigger fish to fry, and that fish is us, the United States. So if we think we can sort of, pull these strings to play them against each other. So it's like Three Stooges, and they're all just fighting each other. Come on, you think Putin and Xi are that stupid to allow us to manipulate them into a contentious relationship, and so they start fighting amongst themselves? Get real. That is not happening. That is wishful thinking. So that is the article from Rand Corporation, from Bruce Bennett, how we can prepare the United States to take on this trilateral imperialist partnership. The solutions are begging. We really don't have a good idea or good ideas of what we can do to stop these countries. And like I said earlier in the beginning, there may be nothing we can do, and we'll just be punching at air, just clawing away, trying to find something, but nothing, will work. And the sooner we realize that, the sooner we realize we can't continue down this road of hostilities and raising tensions, the better. But I'm not too optimistic with the brain dead people we have in power right now. The only person who seemed to want to bring everybody together, and I know this person is very controversial, Donald Trump. He's the one person that tried to get along with Xi personally, tried to get along with Putin personally, tried to get along with Un personally, because ultimately it's the heads of states of these countries that have the power, and if they can sit in a room and find some common ground, that is better for all of us, because firing a million USBs of K-pop at Pyongyang is not going to tumble the North Korean regime, and nor will any of the other solutions offered do anything to take down this triumvirate opposed to us. So we need some clearer thinking from our leaders, but again, I am very skeptical. Well, that is it for now. If you are new to my channel, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.